conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
And welcome everybody to another amazing week right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Today's show, Beshear goes on a European tour. A lot of questions to be asked, of course. Speaking of Beshear, and apparently some Republicans are pushing for universal pre-K. We'll talk about why that's a horrible idea. And really the people who think it's a great idea are either stupid or people who, well, want to use government to solve everybody's problems. Schools are obviously raising taxes. They've decided to fight back with a new idea of blaming somebody other than themselves for why your taxes are going up. Amy McGrath is running, leaving everybody, literally everybody, to ask the question of, oh God, no, and oh why? Oh why? And then if we have time, Joseph Gerth hits us with another hard-hitting opinion piece about why Christians suck. So obviously this will be a hot take from him. We'll say that. As if his whole entire idea of being uninterestingly predictable in going after, of course, the basic and most simplest of things that are good in this world, like religion and morality, he's going to take issue with it. You can count on old Gerthy to take issue with that. So we'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. If you're listening to this on radio or TV and you want to know where else you can listen to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, just head over to theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's theandrewshow.com. Also, if you're watching this on WBNA 21 on Friday nights at 11 o'clock, you can catch my late night show, Late Night on the Right, hosted by yours truly, where I sit down with three other people and we laugh and joke our ways through national headlines. Of course, the Andrew Cooperrider Show, though, focuses on Kentucky politics. And starting us off, as I mentioned, Beshear is not apparently in Kentucky. He's decided to go on another European vacation. Now, of course, you may remember last year this became quite a sticking point when Andy Beshear spent $80,000 to go speak at Davos, $80,000 of taxpayer funds. Well, he's back at it again. This time he's decided to take him and his wife on a little taxpayer-funded vacation to Ireland, UK, and France. Now, he's going to call this an economic development tour. And when I posted about this online, a few people took issue with it, claiming that took issue with me taking issue with it, claiming I was being ridiculous. We don't know if this is a waste of time or not. We'll have to see what economic deals come about it. And I'm going to tell you why that's a stupid take. First off, in case you didn't know, Kentucky already pays a marketing company called VRA almost $700,000 a year. We pay him $693,747 to market in specifically the UK and France. And where is it that Beshear is headed? Ireland, England, that's the UK, and France. So literally the same places where we are paying a marketing company $700,000 a year to push Kentucky on people to great effect. I know when I walk around here in Kentucky and I can't tell you how many Irish people, how many English people, how many French speakers that are not from an African country and they're migrating here. I can't tell you how many of them I run into on a daily basis. I'm constantly meeting people that are like, oh, I'm here to check out your distilleries because I watched an ad for them on my local television. I know that happens all the time. I'm sure it happens to you. But it does leave one to wonder, though, are we going to get our $700,000 back? If Beshear has to come in and be the closer, if Beshear has to come in and actually bring the business in, what are we paying them for? Or rather, is the other question, what are we paying Beshear to do there? Well, one clue on who he's visiting with, we can count on him swinging by his old buddy over there at Colmore Farms. Now, Colmore Farms has both farms in Kentucky, Ireland, of course, and then also Australia. And some of you may recognize the name. They own Ashford Stud, among some other farms. And Colmore Farms was one of the two companies before, I believe Andy Beshear doesn't use sponsors anymore on his podcast. Either people realized nobody was watching it, or rather when he did start to use sponsors, and I noticed it. I don't watch his podcast very often. I think I've seen part of three episodes there. But, of course, when I checked out those episodes, I noticed on one of them there, he had sponsors. And then when I watched part of a most recent one, because he had on Harry Sisson, he didn't have sponsors. So I must imagine he took him down when he got called out by yours truly for the fact that he has sponsors. And that leads to a lot of questions, because obviously when you're the governor of a state and you have a part-time job of podcasting and you're being paid directly by sponsors, well, that leaves you some gray area avenues for you to receive direct payment from people who want to influence policy within Kentucky. Obviously, it's a big problem, and it's something that, needed to be called out, did. So it seems like he dropped the sponsors, but one of those sponsors was Coolmore Farms. And Coolmore Farms, I'm sure, is one of the people he's meeting with. So, of course, I'm sure it's really great. Now, the defenders, of course, say, well, you said nothing when Bevin was gallivanting around in the jet. Now, first off, anytime we see people traveling a lot in a plane, we have to ask some questions. Now, most of Bevin's travel that he was attacked for, he actually reimbursed for. There's basically, the way it works, there's an hourly rate to use these planes. And then the departments that you're in, if you're using the private planes owned by the state, they then pay per hour out of their budgets for that plane. However, if you're a constitutional officer and you want to use the plane for personal reasons, you can do that, but you have to pay out of pocket that same rate that they would charge your department. I believe for the private jet, it's about $400 an hour. So you have to pay out of your pocket for that usage. So it's not as if the taxpayers are per se paying for it, but it does give you access to a private jet. And I have no idea what private jet rates go for. I don't know if $400 is steal or a really good deal or right in line with the market. I don't know. But I do know that if you're reimbursing them, you're at least not costing the taxpayer money, though it is maybe a fringe benefit, you could say. But there was a person who took issue with him traveling in that jet very loudly, and that was, of course, Andy Beshear. And so it's funny to see Andy Beshear himself flying all around and gallivanting around the world on our dime. Once we get some open records requests back on how much these trips cost, what exactly he paid for them, we'll be able to answer the question here. Exactly how much of your money did he spend to take him and his wife to Europe? And that does leave another question. I mean, the way it was announced was that Andy Beshear, Brittany Beshear, I think she goes by Brittany, but it's spelled like Brittany. Anyways, Brittany Beshear and then a few other members of the Team Kentucky were going. Now, last I checked, we didn't hire Miss Beshear to be any position. We didn't elect Miss Beshear to any position. We elected her husband, but she happens to be Kentucky's first lady. It does leave to some questions of why she got to go. I mean, look, I get it. You're traveling. You want to bring your wife with you. I like traveling with my wife, but it's not coming out of your pocket, Beshear. It's the taxpayer paying for it. But speaking of reaching into taxpayer pockets to pay for more useless things, Andy Beshear has been on a big push for this pre-K for all, and it's not just Democrats pushing for this, but of course Republicans. And this is an absolutely horrible idea, both from a monetary standpoint, a growth standpoint. Can our schools even handle this? Leaves a lot of questions to be asked. So we'll be talking about that when we come back. You're watching the Andrew Cooperrider Show. If you want to reach out to the show, feel free to email info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. You can also head over to theandrewshow.com. You can hit the contact tab, see a way to contact us there. Shoot us over your emails. I get them from people all the time with stories and everything else. I do the best I can to look through what's sent over to me. So, feel free, reach out. But we'll be back in a few short minutes. And you're back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before the break, I mentioned that Beshear and company are pushing really hard for universal pre-K. And he put this post out there. He said, pre-K for all isn't political. It's about helping our kids, families, and businesses. Leaders from across the state agree. Today, we shared 63 county judge executives, 31 mayors, and the KY Association of School Superintendents all support expanding pre-K this coming season. Now, to be honest, this does get some Republican support, but I do have a lot of questions for all these people, and that is, why do you think this is a good idea? And to give you an idea of the kind of Republican support, actually, last session in the legislature, they had hearings, they talked about it, they really delved into this, gave it a lot of seriousness, and this was a bill from Senator Danny Carroll. It's called the Horizon Act. Now, this would have put in place some programs for universal pre-K to basically pay for preschool, a few more years of school early on for the kids out of the taxpayer's pocket. Now, I'm sure the fact that Danny Carroll is the CEO of a preschool provider has nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with his support for this bill. I'm sure that the fact that they would have more people attending their schools and therefore would be entitled to a raise has no bearing on his support for this legislation. I think we can both agree that, of course, that doesn't cloud anybody's judgment on the matter, but, let's just take a look and put that to the side of perhaps why somebody like Danny Carroll might perhaps want to see this kind of legislation pass. Let's go to why this is a bad idea. First off, this will obviously have to cost us more money. We don't have it. How do we know we don't have it? Well, our two largest school districts in the state right now, Jefferson County Public Schools and Fayette County Public Schools, are both in deep financial issues. In fact, Lexington, of course, is missing money, tens of millions of dollars, and they've had to cut tens of millions of dollars from their budget most recently, and they're under audit from the state. A lot of things being looked in there, too, about financial impropriety. And I'm sure that you look at that heaping pile of dung of a problem and think to yourself, what fix this is to give them even more years of schooling they're in charge of and more money that obviously we're going to have to get from somewhere because they literally can't afford to do what they're supposed to do now on their own. But, they said that's a good idea. And JCPS, of course, they're having big financial issues as well. In fact, they have to sell off assets to meet a $188 million deficit. And if they don't make changes now, in 2 years, that school district will cease to exist because it won't have the money to exist. They will be insolvent, in their own words. They can no longer make payroll. So that's some pretty big financial issues. In fact, JCPS, just to go a little bit more into those financial issues, and I know we talk about them on this show all the time, but it is worth mentioning here. JCPS, for an example here, just announced this past week, they have a I'm not kidding you, okay. They have a $2.5 billion, with a B, billion dollar, $2.5 billion deferred maintenance backlog. $2.5 billion deferred maintenance backlog. That means that there is $2.5 billion worth of maintenance to their current facilities that they know they need to take care of, that they have not done so. They've deferred going ahead and doing that needed maintenance. Maybe they should have dealt with that before they spent tens of millions of dollars redoing all the athletic complexes, but okay. Who are we to judge? Also, JCPS, on the financial side, is losing magnet funding, some funding, a couple $1 million there from the federal government for their magnet funding program, because they're a bunch of racists. That's right. Because they were not treating people equally based upon their skin color, but rather excluding certain groups based upon their skin color. It's white people. But anyways, they were pushing out a certain group from being in these magnet programs. The federal government looked at that and said, look, you can't take tax dollars and be racist with it. That's unconstitutional. That violates the civil rights laws. We are going to remove that funding unless you fix this. They decided they didn't want to fix it, so they're losing that funding. So on top of the money side of things, on top of the fact that our school districts have already proven that they literally can't, and it's not just those two biggest school districts either, by the way. We'll talk about this in a second when we come to raising taxes, but literally there is more than, I think, a dozen or so school districts raising taxes beyond 4%. I think every single school district basically in the entire state raised your taxes this year 4%. And there's a few other school districts that raised it beyond 4%. I believe I got something about Shelby County here today, somebody leading a charge on that. Of course, we know about, what is it? Is it Powell County? Powell County, I believe. We know about Lexington tried to do it, of course, pushback there. Jessamine County doing it, getting pushback there. We know that Jefferson County Public Schools is putting together a team to go ahead and look at new taxes, new ways to pull money in. But literally every single school district raised taxes as much as they possibly could without having to be at a referendum. And then some went beyond that 4% mark. Because here in Kentucky, if you raise taxes, and we'll go into this here in a second about that whole process, but if you raise taxes more than 4%, it goes into a referendum year over year. So on top of the money side, we don't have it, they can't afford it, they can't do what they can. Let's go into the results. So already this program will have to cost you more money. Has to. Because we don't even have the taxpayer funds now, apparently, according to the school districts, to pay for what they're currently doing. So we're going to add on more years. If we add on 2 more years, that's about a 10-ish%, a little over 10, 15% or so increase in the amount of students right away. They're going to have to increase taxes. Money will have to come from somewhere. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that the state of Kentucky is on this path where if we hit certain benchmarks, they'll lower our income tax. And so if you say, well, look, we're not going to touch any funding now, we're going to find new funding. That new funding, if you're not going to cut anything, and of course Beshear would throw a fit if you cut literally anything. So if you're not going to cut anything, Beshear's plan would require to take money out of what we set aside, our savings, our contingency fund, our overages every year. And that means that we wouldn't hit the markers that the legislature's laid out to reduce our taxes. So at the very least, what Andy Beshear is advocating for, and the Republicans who would join him, would be at least, if not an outright increase in your taxes, the very least that would happen would be you would no longer get those income tax deductions that you were promised by the legislature all those years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, when they passed this framework to begin with to get us to a 0% income tax that they claim they need. But that, once again, that's just the financial side. Let's go into the results. So this argument by them is that, look, if we got to these students earlier on, we could produce better results. So what's happening is that these kids are coming into school and they haven't all done pre-K and they don't know how to read at the same level as everybody else. So if we get to them like a year or two earlier, and of course we can't trust the parents to teach them to read, we don't want to create any programs to remind and force any marketing programs to try to get parents to teach their own children to read. No. We need to go to the state now to do this, of course. A parent can't be trusted to raise their own child. I think we all know that to be true, of course. So the argument is if we get to them sooner, we can teach them to read. We can teach these Dumbo kids to read because their Dumbo parents aren't teaching them to do it. And then they will get better results. Now, if that's the case, then you would say, okay, so while maybe less than 50% of the kids statewide are at least proficient in reading when they graduate high school, at least though you would say, well, if you're able to teach them to read and the parents aren't able to do it, we would see we'd see that play out in the numbers. We'd see that the longer these kids are in school, the better and more of them that become proficient in reading. Because of course the school has them, right? That's the argument. That's the argument for universal pre-K. If we have them for more time, they will increase. So if that's your hypothesis, your current evidence for that would be, look, these kids come in with, let's say, a 30% proficiency rating in English or in reading. And by the time they graduate, we have 70% of the kids reading, or even 50% what they have now. So 20% are coming in, and now it's 50%. If we can get to them sooner and we can start the baseline maybe of like 40%, maybe we could get to 70% by graduation time. That would be your argument. The problem with that, and the reason why you're not hearing that argument for this universal pre-K, is because that's not what's happening in the data. In fact, here you go. So statewide reading in 5th grade. So this is after the schools have had them, for 5-6 years, right? Statewide reading in 5th grade, 48% of 5th graders are at least proficient in reading, 48%. Okay, not that great, but maybe they started really low. They didn't, by the way. They started out at about 46%. So across those 6 years that they've had these kids, they've only gotten 2 percentage points more proficient in reading, but that's growth. So surely by the time they graduate, if in 5 years they can get 2%, they should be up above 50%, right? Well, grade 10, which is the last year they do reading assessments here in Kentucky, this was statewide last year, only 46% of those kids were proficient in reading. And we're not seeing year-over-year growth either in the numbers. So you want to blame it on COVID or this or that. That doesn't play out in the numbers either. So you can't afford what you're doing now. 2% of the kids less are proficient in reading from 5th to 10th grade. So it seems like the longer they're in your grasp, less kids know how to read. And then also, you can't manage what you have. You can't manage what you have. You don't have the money for it. You're going to have to raise our taxes in order to get not great results, if anything, no results based upon your prior behavior. Please, anybody, justify to me why universal pre-K should be something anybody goes after, especially so-called fiscal conservative Republicans. So when we come back, speaking of school districts, they've come up with a unique way to argue for these tax increases, and also we'll hit upon the fact that Amy McGrath is running. She's a Marine, fighter pilot, mom, plays soccer. These are all things you probably are just hearing for the first time, obviously. We'll have that after this short break. And you are back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So we covered it extensively on the shows regarding not just school woes, but schools trying to increase taxes. For those of you who are unaware, the way this works in Kentucky, and it does get a little confusing, but just so you understand, the way this works in Kentucky is that they don't look at the rate. Okay, so the school board votes on a rate per $100 that they tax your property. So if your house is worth $100,000 and they're taxing at 50 cents per 100, then for every $100 you're taxed at, of course, 50 cents a year. So that tax would be $500 if that's their rate. So they are, that's just kind of the way it works. So anyways, so they set this rate. That's the way it's expressed. However, the way the law is wrote when it comes to this taxing is that they cannot increase your taxes more than 4% year over year. Now, this isn't the rate, 4%, but the actual amount you write the government. So if you're writing the government a $500 check on your taxes, it can only increase by 4% year over year. So that $500 could only, at maximum, go up to, what is that, 4 times up, 20? Can only go up to $520. And so with that in mind, when they take a look at the rate, there's something called a compensating rate, because property values go up year over year. And many times they exceed a 4% growth. And so sometimes the rate goes down, but the actual amount you're writing the government in a check goes up 4%. Now that's the maximum amount they're allowed to raise taxes before it's pushed over to what's called a referendum vote, where if a certain number of citizens, based upon the amount of people that either voted in your last presidential election, I believe it's 10% of the voters that voted in the last presidential election, or 5,000, sign up, whichever's lower, sign a petition to put it on the ballot, then it puts onto the ballot to be voted on the next election time. And the school then has to make their case of why they need to raise your taxes beyond that 4%. But if they only raise it 4%, it's not able to be referendum. It can't be put on a ballot for a vote. And so a few school districts have raised it above that 4% mark, 5, 6, 7%. We've seen one as high as 15%. And of course, this is being pushed over to the citizens are coming out against it and pushing for a vote against a vote to repeal that tax increase by the school district. And the school districts are kind of using the fact that it just took me 3-ish minutes to explain to you how our taxes are calculated and what words mean, to be able to come after and obfuscate who's responsible for this tax increase. And Jessamine County Schools is trying out new ideas. See, they've decided that despite the fact that they hold a meeting where they then vote on a rate of taxation, this year they decide to keep it the same rate, but because property values went up more than 4%, it increases taxes beyond that 4%. And so they've decided that in order to blame somebody other than themselves for raising taxes 4%, they're going to blame the property value administrators. You see that? They're taking this tact of saying, look, we didn't raise your taxes 4%. Your property value administrator raised your taxes for over 4% because he raised, or she raised, I believe it's a he in Jessamine County, raised your taxes raised your property value more than 4%. And what are we to do? Set a lower rate? Sure, we'd pull in 4% more money, but, come on. We didn't do this. We just approved the same rate as we did last year. We didn't do anything. It's, the property value administrator's fault. You should be mad at them, not us. Don't fight us on the increase. Sure. Are you paying more in taxes? Yes. Are you writing the check to us? Yes, you are. Are we the ones who voted? We are the ones who actually voted on the tax rate. Are we the ones who levy the tax in law? Yes, we are. We are the ones who levy the tax in law. But you know whose fault it is? It's the people that say your property's worth so much. Not us, who you write the check to, set the rate, vote to raise your taxes, have meetings to do so, and set the rate it's levied at, and are the ones who, you collect the money. Well, the sheriff collects the money, but gets the money from the sheriff. Sure, we do all that. But we're not to blame if those darn greedy PVA people weren't over here setting your property values so high. It wouldn't be a problem at all. Yeah, our bottom line's growing by 5%, 6%, but it's not our fault. That's what they're trying to sell. And I really hope people don't buy it. Speaking of things people are trying to sell that is on some shaky ground, Amy McGrath has jumped into that Senate race. Of course, she famously lost to Mitch McConnell, 38% of the vote. And she did run for Congress as well against Andy Barr. And if you live somewhere other than the 6th district during that time frame, I'm happy for you. You were spared the endless ads and the endless door knockers. I think I had probably 6 or 7 people knock my door trying to get me to vote for Amy McGrath at that time. It was pretty intense campaign, to say the least. Closest anybody came to unseating them. But she in that campaign, she ran ads talking about how she is, of course, a Marine. In case you didn't know that, she's a fighter pilot. Now, technically, I believe she sat second seat, but she did help fly the plane. So she's a fighter pilot. She's a mom. She's a mom, too. In case you didn't know, mom, fighter pilot, Marine. Now, you may be asking yourself, how does this make you qualified to be in office? How does this relate back? In sales, we have something called FAB, Feature Advantage Benefit. So, if I'm trying to sell somebody something, I tell them the feature. So a car, for example. This car comes with a steering wheel. The advantage of having a steering wheel is that you can now direct the car where to go. And the benefit to you there is that as long as you direct the car properly, you will not wreck into things. And you will make it alive to your destination. That's a feature advantage benefit, for an example. And when you're doing politics, you want to do the same thing. You want to mention something about you that's a feature, tell people why they should care, and then tell people how that benefits them. And the problem with Amy McGrath's prior campaigns, not to give out free campaign advice, is she certainly hit upon 3 features really hard. Marine, fighter, pilot, mom. However, she never told us the advantage and benefit to electing someone who files into those categories. Actually, now that I sit there outside of some crazy far-left ideas, I don't actually know exactly what policy she had or what she stood for, other than being a mom, Marine, and fighter pilot. And then, of course, she lost to Andy Barr, and then she decided to run statewide against Mitch McConnell and rolled out the same campaign. And the rest of you were welcome to that nauseating and constant advertising of the fact she's both a Marine, a mom, and a fighter pilot. And maybe you're ready to gouge your eyes out and put a drill to your ears. However, she's coming back. And even Democrats are asking the question why. Online independent journalist Olivia Krauth actually posted that she's been getting messages from even some of the most staunch liberals asking the question, why, God, why is Amy McGrath running? Please, why? No, that's not what she said. They said, why is Amy McGrath running? But I think that's the internal monologue. Why is she running? It's a great question. She's proven she can't win. People literally make fun of her ads. They're repetitive and annoying. Not even Democrats are really all that excited she's running. Why is she doing this to herself? I don't know. And I wish she would ask herself that question before the rest of us are welcome to another election cycle of Amy McGrath ads, which, look, maybe we'll get another classic like the look over the shoulder soccer ball thing. Because Kentucky's known for their mass amount of voters that love the sport of soccer. I think of Kentucky, I think soccer. I mean, some people think horse racing, bourbon, aeronautical industry, basketball, maybe football. But apparently soccer, top of mind. Well, coming up after this, Joseph Gerth has written an opinion article that, of course, hates on Christians. We'll have that after this short break. And you are back here in this final segment of the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Now, for those of you unaware, Joseph Gerth is an opinion writer for the Courier-Journal, and he can be counted on, of course, at all times to provide a absolutely, stupid, horrible, literally dumber than a bag of potatoes take on literally any issue. In this case, he's taking issue with a bill that the legislature has passed, that this past session, that allows moral instruction outside of school. So basically what this is that once a week, a period of time, 45-minute, hour-long period of time can be set aside if a parent opts their child into it for their child to be allowed to be taken off campus by some private organization and given some type of moral instruction and then brought back. In this case, most of the time, of course, they're talking about Christian teaching. So a church or some other group can come there, pick up the kids, take them back to the church, spend 30, 45 minutes talking to them about the Bible or Torah or whatever religion it is, and then take them back to school. And Oldham County has been considering the LifeWise Academy, who offers this service. They offer it in Ohio too as well, to be able to run a program the same way for the school districts there in Oldham County. Simple, easy enough. Basically just a youth group outside of school. And if your kids don't attend, that's okay. They're allowed to do something else during that period. But this is all what I just described. They're a big problem with Joseph Gerth. Now, of course, he had no problem when it was drag queen story hour inside your schools. He has no problem when your actual tax dollars are being taken to teach his viewpoints to your children. But when your tax dollars aren't even being used to teach moral instruction that the parents have decided that kids can take part in, opted into, not opted out of. That's the other thing. All these other things, like the gay sex stuff, that the schools take your tax dollars and teach to kids. If you don't want your kid a part of it, you have to sign a form to opt them out. This is something you have to sign a form to opt them into. And it's not being paid by taxpayers. Literally, it's not even close to the same moral instruction they've been getting from the crazed leftist lunatics that have been running much of our school's health curriculum. It's far different. No taxpayer funds. You opt into, not out of. Doesn't even happen on school campus. But this is too much. Gerth can't handle it. So he writes this article. Anti-Semitism, loss of education time, reasons to reject religious classes. He goes on to talk about Oldham County setting up the, of course, the fact that he's upset that the legislature passed this bill. He's upset that the Supreme Court went ahead and did this. He's upset that this is all going on. And he goes on then to explain how LifeWise Academy works. So here you go. He says, once a week, a red LifeWise Academy bus will pull up in front of the school, and any child whose parent gives their okie dokie. He wrote that in this article, okie dokie. He sat there and said, okay, agreement, sign the form. He said, I'm a writer. Why am I using those words? I can use the word okie dokie. Anyways, okie dokie will climb aboard and ride a short distance to wherever LifeWise is holding classes, probably a local church. If it's like the other LifeWise programs around the country, kids will be given a steady diet of yummy foods like ice cream and candy. Oh my goodness, the horror. How dare kids be given ice cream? Anyways, and a conservative religious message. I don't mean ruin Gerth this, but most religious messages are conservative, by the way. By definition, you're conserving something. You're conserving values. You're conserving morals. But anyways, from books printed by Lifeway Christian Resources, the publishing arm of the Southern Baptist Convention. Under Kentucky's law, students that attend can't be penalized for any work missed, and in fact, the schools can't even hold classes in the core subjects while they're away. Instead, students left behind will be allowed to participate in non-credit enrichment courses like computer classes, art, music, library, physical education, and study hall. Oh my gosh, the horror! The kids left behind might get art class, or they might have gym, or they might have computer classes. Apparently, Gerth doesn't want those taught in schools, or only taught if some of the kids aren't also learning about the Christian faith at the same time. But anyways, he goes on to say that schools that participate in the moral education programs have to shut down learning for 35 to 40 hours per year. Sorry, that 1 hour once a week. They got to shut down learning. Because this other learning that he talked about apparently isn't valuable. At the same time that he claims, and I'm sure would fight, if I took this and said, well, Gerth obviously then supports us cutting all funding for the arts from all the public schools, Gerth would throw a fit. He'd throw a big fit. I'm not just saying that because he's a bigger guy. Okay? He'd throw a big fit. But here he's now calling this no learning, shutting down learning. Art classes apparently aren't valuable according to Joseph Gerth. Anyways. At the end of the hour, LifeWise bus returns students to their school where the other students resume their normal classes. What do kids do at Lifewise Academy? Here you go. According to videos online from Lifewise Academy locations, the kids who do participate in the program are encouraged to tell their friends about the candy and games they play, while their friends are stuck in boring study hall, and encourage them to join. Some of the programs even give kids business cards. He put that in quotations, scare quotes, business cards, that promote LifeWise that kids can hand out to their friends. Others have ice cream and pizza parties if kids meet goals and convincing others to join. He really does not want to give kids ice cream. But anyways, it's clear from watching LifeWise videos widely available on the internet that the goal is to lure kids into the program, then try to convince their parents to attend services at a church that often partners with LifeWise, and church attendance means money. It's almost as if Joseph Gerth doesn't know, and maybe he doesn't realize this, that one of the greatest commandments to us Christians from God, not commandments like chiseled out commandments, but one of the commands he gives us as Christians is to spread his word. He acts like this. He's cracked the code. He found it out. Christians are out here trying to get more people to attend church. The horror! He thinks he's like, oh, people are going to be outraged, but do you know Christians invite others to church? This will get them. That's literally what he's saying. I guess he's not aware that all churches try to get more people to attend, not because they're worried about getting more money. Which, by the way, that money's freely given. He acts like it's not the same as schools who want kids to go to the schools, so that way, of course, the state gives them more money per student, literally a financial reason. No, the only reason churches have for wanting more people to come to know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior is, of course, to bring in a little more extra cheddar into that offering plate. I don't think Joseph Gerth has ever been to a real church. But anyways, according to the Secular Education Association, some of the kids who didn't participate at schools have been bullied by kids who did attend. Oh, some. He can't give us an example, of course, because it doesn't exist. But anyways, in Dayton, Ohio, a rabbi at Temple Israel Dayton told Ohio Journal that some kids at Temple were subjected to anti-Semitic comments by other kids after they returned from LifeWise classes. The curriculum teaches that because my kids are Jewish and don't believe in Jesus, we're going to hell. And touching on just some of the low-level anti-Semitism, just really more ignorant type comments. Oh, geez. The rabbi goes on to say, it's a very specific version of Christianity that I think goes against, in my opinion, the goals of creating an inclusive, positive religious environment in America. Did you know? You're going to be scandalized. Let me tell you what. It's scandalized when you hear this. That Christians believe if you do not accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you're going to hell. Did you know that? I mean, I'm a Christian. Going to church most of my life. I did know that. I actually did show up those many days. Actually, the main kind of like message is to accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior so you may go to heaven. Now, I know some sects of Christianity do believe that Jews are chosen people and they will get to go to heaven as well. Some don't, some do, whatever. Doesn't matter. What matters is it's not anti-Semitic, nor is it anti-Muslim, nor is it anti-atheist, nor is it anti-anything for Christians to hold the belief that they've held for literally over 2,000 years. That if you don't accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you will go to hell and burn for your sins. Joseph Gerth, though, that's a big problem. You know, they call themselves tolerant. They're being intolerant of a religious belief that's existed for literally thousands of years. That doesn't sound that tolerant to me. Well, y'all, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank you all so much for joining me. See you back here next week. Hope you have a great rest of your day.